And our second motion of the day takes us from the law to lived experience. And the motion is, this House believes communities address hate crime better than the criminal justice system. This debate will again be managed by the brilliant Literific, but this time I'll be chairing the discussion, for better or worse, with them and keeping our speakers on time, on topic, or at least trying to. So, will we get stuck in?
Yes, you all know the rules by now, but just to give a brief overview again, we have 7-minute speeches from each of our speakers. You'll notice that we have a new selection of 6 speakers who are part of our community here at the Literific. So community is obviously very important, and we'll be discussing it in the context of hate crime too. And again, you'll hear from the various different speakers. They'll be listening to each other, they'll be engaging with each other, and they'll be drawing on their own personal experiences, but also the experiences of others to show how we can grow together as a society and how we can address this very prevalent issue. So as I said, 7-minute speeches, POIs within the panel, and then at the end, we will open it up to the floor again so that you can ask questions on speakers if you would like to hear a bit more of an expansion on certain arguments that were mentioned, or address something that you feel wasn't covered in the debate. So the debate, and to remind you again of the motion, is this House believes communities address hate crime better than the criminal justice system. So can I have all those for the vote of prior opinion who believe in the motion to vote for the proposition now, please? So if you believe that hate crime is better addressed by communities than the criminal justice system. Okay, that is 15. And then can I have all those who wish to vote for the opposition, please raise their hands now. Okay, that is 12 votes for the opposition. And finally, all those who would like to abstain from the motion, please raise your hand. Okay, so with 10 abstentions, 15 votes for the proposition and 12 votes for the opposition, the proposition carry the motion. And I would like to invite our guest chair, Manly Macaulay, BBC journalist, to open the debate. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm just so excited they've actually let me out of the office. Can you tell I'm enjoying myself? So I'd like to introduce, first of all, the speakers for the proposition: Baker Noble, Nihal Bhatt, Luke Coyle, and for the opposition, Maeve G, Michael Williams, and Ray Thien. And first open for the proposition, a round of applause for Baker Noble.
If your car breaks down, the police and by extension the criminal justice system, they would arrive 3 hours late, take a photo of the tyre and tell you that an investigation is underway. Your community though, somebody nearby has a jack, someone has a spare tyre, and within 10 minutes you're back on the road. That's exactly why communities deal with hate crime better. They don't just respond, they repair. The key word here in this debate is address. And on the proposition, we know that the criminal justice system is incapable of addressing the problem. It isn't necessarily the fault of the system, just the way that it was set up. It's set up in such a way as to only address the problems after they've occurred. The criminal justice system only steps in when a crime has been committed, when there's a criminal and a victim. They do fund some preventative measures, and there's loads of good resources available within the system, but this doesn't necessarily address the problem. The problem can only be truly solved at grassroots levels, within communities themselves. To actually explain, it's probably better that we address what the word address actually means. On the proposition, we believe address to refer to preventing, responding to, and reducing the impact of hate crime, not just punishing it. Unfortunately, the criminal justice system is only good at one of these. We have to realise that this debate isn't just about legality, but also about effectiveness. If anybody's best positioned to make positive change within a community, surely it's the community itself. Just the other night, I went to the Anglican chaplaincy, the Hub, at Queen's, to listen to a speech delivered by our very own, I don't think he's here, but our very own Matthew Spratt. And I'm not a particularly devout Anglican, and if the speech was delivered by someone from the outside, I probably wouldn't have gone. But it wasn't. It was delivered by my friend, it was delivered by a member of the Literific, and therefore I actively wanted to go, not just to support him, but to hear the message which he so clearly cares about. And this is the same for the crux of this debate. When a community comes together to tackle a problem, the people within the community are much more likely to get involved because it's organised and run by their own people. Let's take, no thank you. Let's take an example. In Northern Ireland, during the rise of hate crimes against migrant workers in small towns, it wasn't the courts or the police who stopped the abuse, it was the local residents who organised cross-community events, set up neighbourhood watch groups, and paired migrant families with local volunteers. Hate incidents fell dramatically, not because anyone was punished, but because people started to know one another. No, thank you, again. That is what addressing the hate crime really looks like. In the United States, similar community-led approaches like safe zones and restorative justice circles have reduced reoffending rates for hate-related crimes by up to 40%. When offenders face the people they've harmed and hear the impact of their actions, it changes their behaviour. The criminal justice system, by contrast, simply locks them up and hopes that the problem goes away. The role of communities in addressing hate crime is not just in education and support, but also in rehabilitation. While the criminal justice system simply aims to punish offenders, communities are the ones responsible for reintegration. After all, they are the ones who'll have to accept them into their communities once they're released. And I'm sure that the opposition will argue that the criminal justice system does rehabilitate, and it's true to some degree in the UK, although it's still less effective than community rehabilitation and acceptance. The motion also does not specifically mention countries, and we know that for a fact every country is not like the UK. In many countries, no rehabilitation is offered, and the offender simply becomes an outcast in society, ostracised from society. Overall, we would say that it's better to be integrated into society, and that the way to address the problem is education and understanding, rather than simple crime and punishment. If we want genuine change, those individuals must be guided back into society through understanding, not exclusion. Communities are uniquely placed to do that. They can set boundaries and offer redemption, whereas the state just often brands people for life. The opposition will also likely say that communities cannot enforce the law, that they lack power or authority. But that misses the point. We're not saying that communities should replace the law, we're saying that they address hate crime better. It's all about whether they address it better than the criminal justice system. They prevent, heal, and change behaviour more effectively. Yeah. And they, no thank you. And they might also say that the justice system ensures equality, but in practice the system is riddled with bias. Equal protection under the law is meaningless as victims don't trust the police enough to use it. And finally, they might argue that communities can be biased in themselves, and that's true, but the difference is that communities can reform from within, through dialogue and representation, while state systems move slowly and resist accountability. Mr. President, Madam Guest Speaker, the criminal justice system punishes hate crime, but it does not fix it. It reacts after the damage is done, leaving victims isolated and communities divided. Communities, on the other hand, they prevent hate, support victims, and rebuild trust. Go ahead.
Could you use the mic, please, Ray?
Wouldn't you say that communities need funding in order to address hate crime?
Well,
and where would they get that funding?
Well, they can get the funding from the government, they can get it from charitable organisations. The criminal justice system is the other body in this debate, and they need funding as well. Communities use the funding that they get to address the problem better than the criminal justice system. Communities, on the other hand, prevent hate, support victims, and rebuild trust. They create safety not through fear of punishment, but through understanding, respect, and belonging. And that's why, for the sake of justice, compassion, and real social change, I urge you to vote for the proposition. Thank you.
Thank you, Baker. Some very strong arguments there. And that central proposition, can communities reform better from within? Well, there's a question. So we're going now to the opposition and to Maeve G.
Sympathy or justice? That's what this debate truly is about. Proposition will argue that communities who decide to respond to hate crime in whatever way they deem most appropriate is better, more fair. This is just sympathy tied up with a false facade of justice. Yet this isn't justice, it's a reaction, a response. It's nature at its finest. Someone or something commits an action or hurts you or your team, your community. You want to defend and respond, often in unpredictable and unsafe ways. Someone says something negative about your favourite football team or band. Would you really let that slide? Chances are you would argue with them on it or even fight them. It's in our nature. Fairness is what humans are trying to achieve by addressing hate crime themselves. However, especially for those involved, what is considered fair or equal might not be, due to it being blown out of proportion by those involved. Obviously, while hate crimes are fundamentally awful, there's no arguing about that. If you're on the receiving end, oftentimes vengeance and payback is what is wanted. And yes, justice, but all three simultaneously is, even while being perceived to be occurring, is not real, and it's not a long-term solution. When a community is directly involved in this issue, they feel the need to respond and make those who committed the hate crime feel the same way, oftentimes by committing their own hate crimes in return. Very rarely, peacefully, like what Baker was talking about. How ethical. After this retaliation, can you guess what happens? Yeah, that community then responds, and then the original community responds, and it goes on and on and on, often escalating in severity as time goes on. It's fighting fire with fire. Obviously, this isn't a good idea, especially when the actions being committed are illegal, but it just further adds kindling to the fire and reinforces whatever beliefs the opposing communities have of each other. And it does just create more work for the inevitable response of the criminal justice system in the end. Is Proposition really trying to convince us that they believe that an explosive, impulsive, unorganized response to hate crimes is the best response rather than the calm, cautious, organized response of the criminal justice system? Yes, we'll admit the criminal justice system isn't perfect. It can take a while to receive this justice, sometimes taking years. And yes, we'll hold up our hands and admit it does occasionally fail communities. But when this happens, the system is held accountable. The justice I mentioned is fair. It looks at the situation rationally, without bias. It takes into account a variety of different background issues which might have not even been thought about by the responsive communities. This doesn't even mention the fact that instead of stoking the fire, escalating the situation and making it worse, it can end the situation once and for all. Whether this be by putting one of the leaders into prison or by just giving an example of it, by creating initiatives as well, which can bring around peace and change by changing these hateful mindsets. Or would you rather the smouldering fire, flickering in the corner for years, occasionally being stoked by one issue or another, but never being put out and resolved? That's what Proposition wants. Disparity is present everywhere. Look at today's debate, where the gender disparity on this issue could definitely be spoken about. Yeah, this is often overlooked, as the same communities in different areas believe they're all in the same situation. While the hate crimes being committed might be the same, the other environmental factors most definitely will not be, which can cause major issues. What I'm illustrating here is similar communities in different areas will hold different power. Due to the current social media availability, hate crimes against certain communities now affect all of the similar communities, or it can be mass organised to target multiple areas at once, across countries, where these affected communities then all decide how they want to retaliate. But not all these communities, even if they are the same or similar roots, will be in the exact same position. If a certain community is the majority in one area and respond to a hate crime in a specific way, yes, that might be effective and work, at least in the short term. But if a similar community is a minority in another area and they try and copy this, whatever action is taken, especially those in the areas where those who committed the original offence are in the majority, it could horrendously backfire. It could lead to fatalities. And just due to the difference in the situations, this could and would make the entire situation majorly worse, further escalating the situation, potentially making it nationwide, and it adds to the fire. Furthermore, a hate crime will be addressed the same way in any criminal justice system in a country, whether it be Belfast, Bristol, Leeds, London. Could you say the same about a community's response or ability to respond? No. This would change depending on the location. How is that better? Yeah.
So
Look, could you use the mic, please?
Oh, sorry. So there was a Pride event in Ballymena where a young man spread slurry over the road of the route the Pride event was taking. He was released. There was no uniformity and there was certainly no punishment given out to him. It showed a bias in the justice system that I think you're ignoring.
We've already admitted the criminal justice system isn't completely accurate right now, and it is something that is having to be worked upon. But while the criminal justice system is trying to change, they then have to deal with the explosive responses of communities as well as trying to manage what actually happens. Lastly, I want to briefly talk about mob mentality and how Proposition is arguing that mob mentality is better at responding to hate crimes. Yet these types of responses to hate crimes committed can get out of hand so quickly, especially because of this mob mentality. It goes back to human nature. Everyone feeds off each other's anger, and before you know it, no one is aware of their actions because everyone is encouraging everyone else. The city is ablaze. It's happened at so many different events. I'm sure you can all think of multiple different places and things that have happened. The majority of cases where communities have tried to respond to these hate crimes, mob mentality takes over, sometimes turning these peaceful responses violent. It doesn't happen in the criminal justice system. It's rational, it's thought through, it's not impulsive. Furthermore, the jurors can't be influenced by outside information. Many go onto a media ban. Overall, in what world is chaotic, dangerous, impulsive reactions from angry, hurt communities a better response than the calm, logical response of the criminal justice system, who are the people that can actually bring around justice to these harmed individuals, not short-lived vengeance? Now I ask you, which is more fair to the victims? Better, if you will. A hate-filled, quick, angry response, which in reality gets us nowhere, or actual justice for the wrongdoing, which can only be brought around by the criminal justice system. Thank you.
Thank you, Maeve. You almost got a spontaneous round of applause in the middle of that for your gender observations. We'll say no more. And the next speaker is Nihal Bhatt. Thank you.
Close your eyes and picture this. It's a quiet Saturday night, laughter hums through the streets, someone's playing music, and someone's walking down the streets. The world feels calm, ordinary, like every other Saturday night. And then, the scream of a fire alarm. Windows shatter, smoke claws at the sky, a child is crying inside a burning house. Neighbors rush out, some in pajamas, some barefoot, their faces lit by the orange glow of a car engulfed in flames. There are no police sirens yet, no lawyers, no journalists, no headlines. Just panic, just chaos. And in that chaos, one man steps forward. Someone presses a gun into his hands. The crowd, trembling with fury, starts shouting, "Vengeance, justice, fire for fire." But the man raises his voice, calm, steady, unshaken. "If you have weapons, take them home. If you do not have them, do not seek them." And suddenly, the crowd falls silent. That man was Martin Luther King. And in that single breath, before the police arrived, before the courts convened, before the history books were written, before any action was taken, justice was born, not from punishment, but from people, from the communities. Because hate crimes are not fought in courtrooms. They are fought in the hearts of communities. And that is why this House believes communities address hate crimes better than the criminal justice system ever can. The criminal justice system is a fire alarm that rings only after the house has burned down. It reacts, but it does not redeem. Hate crimes in England and Wales have quadrupled over the past decade, even as penalties have stiffened. So, if punishment worked, hate would have vanished by now. But the opposition fails to understand that hate cannot be handcuffed. You cannot fine it 500 quid. A courtroom silences hate for a day. A community can silence it for a generation. Because punishment ends in silence, but only education ends the attitude. We on the proposition stand for healing over punishment, understanding over paperwork, and prevention over prosecution. Because the criminal justice system, with its cold walls and a colder language, does not see hurt. It only sees crime. But communities see both. They see the trembling hands of a victim, the silent shame of a survivor, and the ripple of fear that spreads across every street, every school. Hate is not born in courts, and it cannot end there. Hate is born in homes, playgrounds, workplaces, and communities, and it is there where it must be fought. We need schools to teach empathy, local leaders who build unity, and platforms that encourage dialogue, not judges who deliver delayed verdicts. Restorative justice programs where perpetrators meet their victims understand their harm, and work toward rebuilding have shown real results in reducing hate recidivism. The criminal justice system draws a line. You are guilty, you are not. Communities bridge the gap. You are wrong, but you can change. A hate crime gets reported. The police file statements. Lawyers argue. Months pass. The victim relives the trauma. And in the end, a statistic gets added to the database. But the fear, the stigma, the divide, all of it stays. According to the UK Home Office in 2023, hate crimes have increased by a staggering 24% in just 1 year, even though sentencing for offenders have become tougher. So if harsher laws were the answer, hate would have vanished by now. But remember this, when one person does something wrong, it doesn't define the entire community. Yet somehow we have forgotten that. One man makes a mistake and suddenly a million are branded guilty. Instead of holding the culprit accountable, we start hunting everyone who looks like him, prays like him, or speaks like him. And how do we justify that? We say, the opposition says, use the criminal justice system, right? Use it there. Report the offender, seek justice through the law, and that's how it should be. But instead, we take to our screens, we record, we mock, we troll. We make villains out of innocent people. We humiliate the good ones, shatter their confidence, and teach them to hate themselves for crimes they have never committed. Tell me, what kind of justice is that? That is exactly what communities try to address. And it is a shame that opposition fails to understand that. Communities make the understanding firm that that hate is not the option. Communities address the problems from the inside and not superficially like the criminal justice system. 9 out of 10 crimes in the UK never reach a courtroom, not because victims don't care, but because they don't trust the system that cares for them. But they do trust their neighbors, their teachers, their friends, the people around them, and this very community, which counts them not as a case number, but as a soul. No, thank you. And that's where communities so wonderful, like the Victim Support for Northern Ireland, take over. And they have been doing this since 1981. So, to my friends on the opposition and others, if they still believe that criminal justice system handles hate better, then I wish you good luck waiting for your judges and court appointments while we'll be outside having already fixed the problems, done repainting the walls, rebuilding the trust, and inviting everyone for dinner, reminding the world that the cure for hate was never punishment. It was you, it was the people around you, and it was this very community. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nahal. And I must say that the standard of storytelling in these debates today, there has to be some future journalists in this room as well as leaders. But anyway, so I'd like to introduce now for the opposition, Michaela Williams.
Ladies and gentlemen, one of my flatmates is from Ballymena, and one night she casually dropped that her hometown was up in riots. Now, I'm sure you've probably heard about the Ballymena riots, but long story short, there were these 2 Romanian boys who allegedly assaulted a young local girl. Parts of the community, in an attempt to address the situation, disrupted the town into riots of hatred toward Romanians, and that sentiment was spread towards all foreigners in the area. While the catalytic assault was not a hate crime, the reason I use this example is to help paint a picture of what happens when a community takes justice into its own hands. My point being, the moral compass of a community cannot always be trusted. However, community vigilantism is not the only way in which a community might address hate crimes. Other ways include neighborhood groups, non-government organizations, cultural organizations, etc. But while peaceful community responses have value, they do not address hate crime better than the criminal justice system, because the criminal justice system is able to provide formal accountability, legal consistency, and deterrence in a way that the community just isn't capable of. To go a little deeper into this point, the thing that makes the criminal justice system different from the community is that it is bound by law. This means that there is due process, evidence standards, the right to a fair trial, consistent sentencing. These are safeguards that are put in place to prevent any bias. It adds a level of fairness that the community doesn't have. There's nothing holding the community accountable for any mishaps in their handling of a hate crime. We could talk about how, in the past decade, the number of reported hate crimes in Northern Ireland that are actually being addressed is really low. But these low figures still reflect a system that tracks evidence, operates under law, and can be held accountable. In contrast, the community responses have no obligation to be fact-based, fair, or proportionate. For my next point, I want to expand on the idea that community responses to hate crimes can often be unethical and actually escalate harm. The thing is, communities are not impartial. As we heard from Maeve, when trying to address these hate crimes without legal process, they often act out of fear and anger. There is such a high level of misunderstanding and a lack of empathy that goes into this and can actually lead to hate crimes on both sides. When people feel attacked, they try to justify attacking, an eye for an eye, right? But this is so unethical and can even lead to collateral damage as well. Let me share some examples of how community vigilante justice actually has worse outcomes. First, the New Orleans lynching in 1891, when a group of Italian immigrants were acquitted after being accused of murdering the police chief. A mob of local citizens, upset with the verdict, lynched 11 Italian immigrants. No one was held accountable. Second, anti-Muslim mob violence in India in 2020, where Hindu nationalist mobs targeted Muslim neighborhoods in Delhi. Dozens were killed and hundreds were injured. And lastly, as you already know, the Ballymena riots were hate crimes justified as community vigilantism towards immigrants in Northern Ireland. What this shows is that if we claim that communities address hate crimes better than the criminal justice system, then we open the door for harmful things such as ethnic scapegoating. Sometimes community justice is driven by prejudice and can actually escalate hate rather than reduce it. The thing that the proposition is leaving out is that the hate crimes that the community is fighting against are committed by the community. Without due process, communities are vulnerable to mob rule, misinformation, and bias, which makes justice impossible as the law becomes irrelevant. Some might argue that there are non-government organizations that actually address hate crimes better by providing support to victims, regardless of whether a crime has been reported or not. And it may be true that they provide support better, but it is a little bit of a stretch to claim that they address hate crimes better as a whole, as there is so much more that goes into such a thing beyond support. Emotional support is so important, but anything other than the criminal justice system simply lacks the ability to enforce power, punish perpetrators, or deter hate crimes in the first place. While these organizations are so important to fill the gap of helping victims, since this is something that the criminal justice system lacks in, they are not a replacement, rather a complement. While the community can be incredibly effective, it just isn't enough to address hate crimes on its own. Now, if the criminal justice system is so great, then why are the hate crimes rising in Northern Ireland? This is a really, really great question, and it brings up an excellent point. But it's important to remember a couple of things. First, a higher number of reports could actually be a reflection of a greater awareness and confidence of victims to come forward. Second, that hate crimes are complex and oftentimes situational. For example, the rise of immigrants that have been entering Northern Ireland lately might cause an influx of local tensions and prejudices, leading to a higher number of hate crimes. And third, just because the rates are so high does not necessarily indicate that the community is doing better than the criminal justice system, as these organizations are likely just as overwhelmed as the criminal justice system. In conclusion, the Ballymena riots show what happens when communities take justice into their own hands. What began as outrage ended in hate-fueled violence, not justice. I've shown today the criminal justice system provides, not only does the criminal justice system provide due process, consistent, and accountability, it's not perfect, but it's structured to protect against bias and escalation. By contrast, community responses can actually worsen harm, as we've seen in Ballymena, New Orleans, and Delhi. When emotions replace law, hate crimes multiply, not disappear. And while non-government organizations offer vital support, they can't investigate or punish offenders. They complement the justice system, they don't replace it. So yes, communities have a role, but only the justice system can deliver real justice and real protection. Thank you.
Thank you, Michaela. There's so much food for thought there in terms of communities and how they respond. So the final speaker for the proposition, Luke Coyle.
Mr. President, esteemed co-chair, today the proposition put forth a motion as integral to recognise as oxygen is to our very lives. From the dawn of time, throughout the time of the Oregon Trail and to present day, we have relied upon our communities for so much. From murder trials to fraud trials to aid in times of need, we have relied upon our fellow man. So why must we refuse to rely upon them now? I am sure that we all agree, ladies and gentlemen, that our communities, that the community of Belfast, the community of my experience of Derry, is integral to our day-to-day lives. So why must we not trust them with an issue that affects not only the individual? Hate crimes are not simply an isolated event for one person. They are a matter of public and communal concern. So why must we not address them as such? Firstly, I'd like to discuss the slovenly response of the criminal justice system in dealing with hate crime. As it stands, our justice system is bloated, a rotting corpse, our prisons and courts too choked by needless proceedings to act as an effective check against hate crimes. This is not a stumbling block upon which our communities fall. Acting as a cohesive unit, our communities create a vast, diverse panel of judgment, allowing for collective ownership of punishment when we dole it out and swift responses when needed. I should also point out that a communal approach to addressing hate crimes allows for a wide range of minorities to have their say upon what a hate crime is and how we must respond to them. Who here truly trusts some white-haired old judge to defend the interests of a minority group that they, well, in their time have seen decriminalised, recriminalised? I mean, my experience as a gay man, I don't know if I would exactly trust a man who was a voter of Thatcher or a judge who quite liked her policies to protect my rights. But I would trust people in my community. I would trust the people in this room. So why shouldn't I try to outsource it to you? Why shouldn't I rely on you to help me with my problems? Why shouldn't we address it together? I'd also like to further expound upon a point raised by my good friend Baker. Communities are superior in addressing hate crime because, unlike the criminal justice system, communities are equipped not just to fulfil the punitive aspect of hate crime, but also the preventative role. For decades, the complaint has been raised that the criminal justice system does little to prevent crimes, that it does not unload the gun, it merely punishes those who fire it. But this affliction is not one which affects our communities. They are not chained by reactivity. They can proactively take steps to educate on the nature of hate crimes, distributing leaflets and lectures and facts among the population, allowing for the free flow of honest information that is the anathema to hate crimes. My friends, education is indeed the death of hatred, and it is an unfortunate reality that our criminal justice system cannot educate. It can only punish. Another thing I'd like to mention is how circular the opposition is in its challenge to our motion. They tell us that we have to give the justice system a little more time. We've been giving it time since the 60s. That we just need to wait. Justice is around the corner. The ideal, the utopia is just beyond our sight. Do you know what it reminds me of, ladies and gentlemen? Throughout the summer, I would constantly say, oh, I'll go to the gym tomorrow. The diet starts, it's nigh. But my ever-expanding waistline and the facts of the matter in this case would tell you something different. My friends, it is not right nor true to peddle this lie that we just need to give our institutions more time, because what we notice is that when we give institutions more time, they do not progress, they stagnate. Yes?
Do you not believe that
Sorry, Mike, please.
Do you not believe that the criminal justice system has progressed over the last 60 years, and many legislations have been passed in the past 60 years that have completed progression? It just does take a little bit more time than hate-filled communities' response.
Well, what I'd love to, grasp there is it just takes a little bit more time. Yes, the law has progressed slightly, but in that time, our communities have progressed eons. Why should we chain ourselves to the law when our communities, and by the way, I'd love to delve into your notion of these hate-filled communities. Ladies and gentlemen, our communities, unlike the opposition is trying to tell you, aren't just these mindless mobs. We on here aren't mindless, are we? Yet we could probably take time to decide upon a course of action together, logically. The opposition are telling you now that you're not right to dole out the punishment, that you cannot provide sentencing, even though it is your community which these things are being done onto. Yes.
Yeah, that's not what we're arguing at all. We're saying that it needs to work in tandem, and only one.
Well,
Oh, I'm not done. Only one institution can actually dole out punishment and dole out, what's the word? Justice.
well, let's be very clear here. Your first two speakers did actually use those words of mob rule, so I'm not going off the reservation here when I say that you're trying to peddle our communities as though they are these mindless mobs, because factually, your two first speakers did say that. Let's also talk about this idea of doling out punishment. You know, who here actually would say, turn around and say, in Northern Ireland of all places, that our courts dole out justice and dole out punishment 100% of the time? Absolutely right. The fact of the matter is, it's not the case. My friends, we'll also now discuss the great advantages of communal justice and what it provides for the victim. My colleague Mr. Noble raised an excellent point, that the justice system is riddled with flaws that dehumanise the victims of hate crimes. Let's go back to the Pride event in Ballymena. Tell me, for those who have had their day spoiled, for those who had such a heinous act committed onto them, how is it just to watch that man storm out of the gates of a prison just 20 hours later? How is that right? Is that a justice system that works? Is that a justice system that I want to wait on? Is that a justice system that any of you want to wait on? In conclusion, friends, we in the proposition present to you a simple fact. Communities are better positioned to prevent hate crime, better equipped to punish it when it arises, and ultimately more legitimate as a guiding moral force than the alien body of criminal justice, so desperate to impose its will upon us. Ladies and gentlemen, we simply must pass this motion. For in passing the motion, we recognise its veracity, and we can begin to fully explore the idea of communal justice. And together we can fully realise the idea, the dream, of an honest, swift and just society. Thank you.
Thank you, Luke. I think I might just have been looking at a future politician. And the last speaker for the opposition, Raytheon.
Born too short. My President Biden to my Kamala, esteemed co-chair. I'm the vice president, by the way, that's why. But anyways, let me begin off topic a bit. I was watching the Addams Family TV series last night while writing this out, and I kind of got to thinking about the motion at hand and the parallels with the famous family. We'd all like to live in a world, I hope, where no one is criticized or ostracized or subject to degrading treatment for their thoughts, demeanor, language, personal identity, and in the case of Cousin It and Lurch, physical differences. However, while the Addams differences may not result in hate crimes directed against them in their world, the exact opposite is certainly the case in ours. Both Maeve and Michaela have already touched on communities and community organizations, and they often don't address the problem in the long term and only think of the short, as well as touching on the problem of lack of restrictions on communities and community organizations, which can lead to unethical and dangerous behavior. I will continue these arguments with facts and figures, specifically focusing on Northern Ireland, which I found last night while trawling through the Charity Commission website. That was really fun and enjoyable. I've made the firm decision that I'll never become an accountant. As I said, I'll continue the previous opposition arguments and add a bit specifically. First, communities and their organizations are inconsistent and inefficient in how they operate, which I will dive into, while the justice system runs on constancy and stakes its reputation on it. Secondly, the justice system actually enables the communities and the organizations to provide help to the victims of hate crimes and gives those organizations legitimacy. To have one without the other is not the whole picture of how hate crime proceedings are handled, in contrast to what the second proposition speaker said. Now, I have my own experience with community organizations, receiving therapy services from one of the biggest in Northern Ireland. But while this provided me with a short-term solution, only 10 sessions, it did not come close to really diving into the root of my issue. Why? Well, the therapist I was assigned to in this organization, the therapist I was assigned to griped about this every time we met. She talked about how years ago this organization would provide those who availed of its therapeutic services an unlimited amount of sessions, and then it got shortened to 24, and then to 18, and then to 12, and then to 10. And by the time my sessions were completed, she said they were talking about shortening it to 6 sessions. And of course, I asked why. The service that I believe is essential keeps being cut every couple years. And she responded, "Why, Ray, I wish we were able to have more sessions because you definitely need them. But unfortunately, we don't have the funding." The funding is the huge issue when it comes to community organizations. I know because it says so plainly in black and white in the trustees' annual report, which I again spent all last night and early this morning trawling through, finally putting my law classes to good use. I pull this quote from the Victim Support NI Trustees Annual Report from 2024. "The funding environment continues to be a challenge to the organization, allied with a rising cost of living crisis, and has remained a key organizational risk throughout the year. As costs continue to elevate, this will become more challenging." Forgive me for using our collaborating organization as an example, but it helps my case. And I only have one more statistic that pertains to them. Not only was this concern about funding and financials present in the trustees' report, but for the year of 2024, there was a deficit in funds of around £100,000 for Victim Support NI between its income and expenditures. This is also taken from both the trustees' report and the Charity Commission. Another large community organization that deals with hate crime against the LGBTQ+ community is the Rainbow Project. This organization is also in deficit of around £50,000 between their income and their expenditures, again taken from the same source. Another issue with community organizations is the size. Excluding Victim Support, which is by and far the largest by millions of pounds and over 100 volunteers, more specified organizations like the Rainbow Project and Migrant Center and I only have a fraction of the amount of volunteers and employees in proportion to the demographic that they are meant to advocate for. Specifically when it comes to race-related hate crimes, which have increased this year according to the PSNI, the Migrant Center NI only has 12 employees and 2 volunteers, as taken from the Charity Commission. This is very obviously not enough to deal with the rise in level of hate crimes with a race motivation, which is at more than 1,300 in March. It is certain that this number has raised since March. Can you imagine getting 14 people in total to help those now over 1,300 victims? That's almost impossible. Almost sounds what Luke is trying to make the Justice Department sound like. Ooh. Sorry. It's funny that the police are laughing. Sorry. Now, going into my second point that I previously mentioned at the beginning, the justice system enables the community and their organizations to provide help to victims and therefore supplies them with legitimacy. You cannot have one without the other. It's as simple as that. It's impossible. I'll start off very easy and very on the nose at first before I get into the nitty-gritty. One of the first things you see when you go onto the Hate Crime Advocacy Service website is the logo of both the PSNI and the Department of Justice. Why, it's the same when you go onto the Migrant Center NI website as well. There are a couple of reasons for this. Funding and grants is given to these organizations by the PSNI and, oh God, I'm behind, is given to these organizations by the PSNI and the Department of Justice. Those departments gave the Migrant Center NI over £125,000 in the 23-24 year, providing over half of the community's charities budget for that year. Again, that's pulled from the Charity Commission. But now to the crux of this line of argument, the Victim Charter. As you all know, the Victim Charter lays out the entitlements and services that victims of crime in Northern Ireland can expect to receive. This is only enshrined in law due to the Justice Act, Northern Ireland, 2015. The type of support that these community organizations are able to give only comes due to the legal standing of it provided by the justice and legislative system. Even in the Justice Act, it refers to these organizations as a criminal justice agency, specifically a body or a person which has any functions relating to victims or any other aspect of the criminal justice system is determined as a criminal justice agency. They are entrenched together and forever will be, but only one side can hand down a judgment. Only one establishment can institute a punishment. While the others can support the victim, it cannot do any more than that. For this reason, vote with opposition.
Thank you so much, Ray, with your comedic timing and asides. I actually think next year you could be giving Matthew Griffith a run for his money. So what about the audience? Just wanted to open it up. That was a fantastic debate. The standard of that debate was incredible. In terms of the humour, the humour, the incisive debate, the panache, it really had everything. So please, let's open it up. Who has some questions for the panel? You in the front with the...
I'd like to pose this question to the proposition. So you mentioned that, well, you seem to be pushing that the criminal justice system is something entirely separate. I believe the word was alien in the last speech, to the communities. But is it not the communities that are a part of this criminal justice system that are like members of the police force, that are judges, that vote on the laws and the changes?
Well, I mean, first of all, what I'd like to say there is, just to use your wording, they're part of it, but it's been imposed upon them. The reason I say that it is alien is because so much of what our criminal justice system is, frankly, is not made in Northern Ireland. It's made in Whitehall, it's made in Downing Street, it's made in Westminster. We are not party to those decisions, especially not the level that we should be, especially not the level that communities provide. When it comes to addressing hate crimes, to bring it back to the question, I would much rather be dictated to by a smaller community rather than people with white hair in Whitehall who are deciding, oh yes, that sounds rather amazing to put in the criminal justice system. Because the fact of the matter is, that is what's happening right now. So yeah, to answer your question, although it's not alien insofar as it's very much part of the United Kingdom, it's alien to us because we play very, very little role in actually deciding what goes into the criminal justice system and the codes of laws.
Okay, thank you.
The way the proposition is trying to make this all seem is that it's...
Oh, the mic's not working.
The way that proposition is trying to make all of this just appear is that every action that the community will decide upon will be absolute. It will make everyone happy. That just isn't the case. That just isn't how it would work. There's still going to be people that are upset by the decisions the community makes. And these communities might make these decisions that are way more rash and they will make way more people unhappy. But it's just that small amount of people in that community that it will make happy. But it still won't make the entire community happy. It's not an absolute. Nothing is ever an absolute happiness.
Is there anyone else?
Okay.
Okay, the back
Thank you.
there.
Well, I've changed my mind about 6 times. So I mean, the quality of the speakers, absolutely tremendous. But it's got me thinking. I was actually... and I'm on the opposition. I don't think communities address hate crime better, but it can't be done without the community, so the community has a role. The Judge Marnin, made 34 recommendations, I believe. 8 of them were about community restorative justice. Is there a role? And he's adamant there is a role. Now, again, this is a personal opinion, so if my boss was here, he might say, oh, I disagree with this guy entirely. Get him out. But in my view, how do I say it? If you were to put the 2 accredited restorative justice organisations on the statutory footing, and that is, I believe, one of the recommendations. So if they were equal part of the criminal justice system, that's Alternatives NI and Community Restorative Justice Ireland, then I do think you've got the community-led way of dealing with it. Restorative justice won't solve everything. It's a voluntary process, okay, and at the minute, it's a voluntary organisation, as is NI Alternatives, so you're dependent on funding, all short-termism, no guarantees, and the community itself will have way wide views. So if those two organisations were on strategic footing, I would suggest that the criminal justice system would be complete. I don't know what the views are. I don't even think that's a question, but I would welcome your thoughts.
So does anybody want to respond to that?
Yeah, so you raise an excellent point in terms of if the criminal justice system had this, it might be even better. But at the end of the day, you know, I can't say something about, you know, if the fact of the matter remains that, you know, I used the example of the Oregon Trail in my speech. We have seen instances where communities can perform acts of justice and address crimes where there is no justice system available. But as you rightly said, the community is integral to the justice system. So I think we have a situation in which the community can dole out justice in absence of a criminal justice system, but the criminal justice system, frankly, cannot survive without the communities. That's why I say that the communities are far better in addressing it, because frankly, they're far more integral to our conceptions of justice than the criminal justice system.
Does anybody else want to come back?
Just want to point out the fact that Luke said that the criminal justice system and communities work together, and that was my point. So thank you.
Walked into that.
Yeah, you did walk into that, didn't you? But no, obviously, at this debate, the restorative justice doesn't exist. It's not enshrined. What this debate is about is what is currently available for justice, and the only way you can get justice is with the criminal justice system. Communities can't. I'm sorry, I don't. So, community organizations are here, but you can only support the victims, and you can't. I am really floundering. You can't really get as much as you want. As nice as it would be to get justice through the community organizations, it's not available at this time. So the only way to go is the criminal justice system.
Just from a purely selfish journalistic point of view, I think what you raise probably merits about an hour of live radio debate. Absolutely. Sorry, and who else has a question?
Gentleman in the front.
Yeah, okay, there you go.
I just wanted to build on top of the audience members' point over there to both houses. How would you go about making better liaising with communities? I think that's where the big gap is, especially in such a divisive place like Northern Ireland, is having those community liaison officers, which I know relies on funding, right? So I just want to open the floor to ideas. If anyone else has ideas in the audience as well, feel free to contribute.
Has anybody any ideas? The floor's open.
Take a stab.
You'll have a go.
Yeah, so you raise an excellent point about the need for community liaison officers, but I would go even a step further than that. We could have community liaison officers, but frankly, if we're going to go for it, we may as well go for it fully. I would say that we should actually develop different chambers of governance, not necessarily within the criminal justice system, but within our communities. You know, I love, you'll maybe learn this about me, but I do love the idea of the sort of classical Athenian agora. I think that would actually work quite well as a chamber of justice, where we have people coming together to vote on issues to bear the brunt of punishment. And so when we talk about funding for communities, I don't necessarily believe that we should fund them and still keep them on an inferior plane to the justice system in, you know, our worldview, because the fact of the matter is that they're actually more integral. So what I believe we should be doing is, I believe that if we're going to fund them, we should fund them absolutely. And in doing so, we should create chambers of collective governance, of collective punishment, and that way we could more effectively address hate crimes and more effectively make provision for victims of hate crimes.
Very good. Is there anyone else who has a question? Oh, sorry, I didn't see you.
So what you're saying is that we should improve the criminal justice system to include communities, yes, but to improve the criminal justice system so that we can better address it rather than just letting communities do it without having that reliance on the criminal justice system and funding from them.
Use the mic.
Yeah, so I think actually what you'll notice there is I didn't talk about improving the criminal justice system. I talked about setting up an organisation outside of the criminal justice system. I don't believe that you can, in the same way you shouldn't build upon shifting sand, I don't necessarily believe we can continue to build upon a flawed institution. What I said there was that we should create chambers outside of the criminal justice system to further strengthen our community values and further strengthen our ownership over punishment as a community. In that way, we would actually, in my opinion, we would have a far better and certainly more tolerant society, because we would all understand that we would all bear the brunt of punishment. So what I actually said there was not necessarily we should strengthen the criminal justice system, but that we should eschew it as far away from ourselves as possible and set up systems of democratic collective punishment.
So create like a pseudo criminal justice system?
Sorry?
Like a pseudo criminal justice system?
More para criminal justice.
But criminal justice system? You said criminal justice system. So
Is there any more questions?
I think one thing we're missing out on is the fact that our criminal punishment system in the UK is quite it does revolve around punishment and rather not rehabilitation. And I think in the first instance, the police doesn't want to seek how do I put it? They don't want to help in the first place. They're there to do their job. They're there to arrest, and they're there to take care of the communities. But first and foremost, it's handing out punishment. That is their role, their intrinsic role.
Does anybody want to come back to that point or respond to that point? Do you want to respond to that point?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I can't help myself.
Yeah, I knew you wouldn't be able to.
I'm afraid I don't necessarily agree with that. With respect, that we are, as far as I'm aware, young man with an amazing football shirt on, by the way.
Long suffering, I should say.
I know. We'll talk later. That's a separate issue. We could debate that all day. But we are, as far as I know, the police are still the only lawful authority in Northern Ireland and in the United Kingdom, so I'm going to start with that. But we realise and we accept and arrest and punitive measures are not the only. It's probably interesting to tell you that about 1,500 calls for service to the police every month are around mental health challenges. And we're not going to, now there are cases where arrest is appropriate, and we could talk about violence against women and girls, we could talk about serious crime, we could talk about serious and organised crime, we could talk about terrorism, but we're not here to talk about that, we're here to talk about hate crime. So I think that's, for me personally, I think that's disappointing to hear, and I can tell you that from my perspective, that's not the case. The other thing that I would like to say is, so Ballymena Pride, two things I wanted to tell you. Number one, we made 2 arrests. The first individual has been charged to court, and he's in court, I think, next month. The second thing is we've made another arrest. He's on bail pending further investigation. The important thing, and it probably marries up with both the proposition and the opposition, is that the community came out and helped clean that up before the parade began. So there's good in the world, and I would just ask you to just remember that. So that's it. I'm going to stop talking now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Me again. Yeah, so first of all, I loved your point on Ballymena Pride there. what I'd like to point out is, yes, the community did come out and help it. Yes, they absolutely did. And you did make 2 arrests, yeah. But justice could have been seen much swifter, in the same way that the community cleaned up the streets so much faster than anyone else, if the justice had been left to be doled out by the community themselves. On the topic of the PSNI,
I know Sue Ann wants to come back to that.
Settle in.
have I done something? On the topic of the PSNI, and I think it's not necessarily a problem with the PSNI so much as it is an institutional problem with a lot of police services, is that yes, they are quite geared toward making arrests, but they're also very much, they wear many hats, I think is the correct term, which leaves them quite uncertain. They have incentives to arrest, yes, but they also have recourse to different social services. Essentially, when you see a PSNI officer, you're seeing an armed officer, but you're also seeing sometimes a social worker, or in many cases, a domestic dispute. So, it's a role that can be very confused, but also one I believe we should certainly divest from. If we're going to talk about community justice, we should absolutely, although listen, we share a bond here, okay? We share a bond. I 100%. But at the end of the day, when we talk about community justice, it's also about community social work, and it's about taking away more of those sorts of extra roles from the PSNI. So yeah, I mean, essentially, although you're right in saying that the Ballymena Pride, the justice system is taking its course right now, it's not taking it fast enough, frankly, and not nearly as fast as the community did.
Response from oppositions?
Yeah, is there a response from the opposition?
I was just going to touch on the lovely officer's point. Sue, thank you. Sounded weird there. But I just want to say, bridging community organizations and then Department of Justice, Justice Department, PSNI, I would have never found out about what you're talking about. Was it 1,300 calls a month or something about 1,500 about mental health? I was one of those calls. I wouldn't have known about the organization that I was referred to without the PSNI, because they gave me a card and they let me go. Yes.
This is the podcast that got away.
So if I could maybe just add to the comments of my colleague Sue, because I feel that some of the conversations around, I always get a bit nervous around when we talk about communities doing anything, because it can be both a positive and a very negative thing. And actually, for me, as I sit and listen to the commentary here, I mean, I consider myself to be a member of 4 or 5 communities. I have a family community, I have a friend community, I have a church community, and I also have a police community because I've been involved in policing for almost 40 years. And I've seen firsthand how communities address hate crime both positively and negatively. And actually, the 6 young people in front of us, you are the future of Northern Ireland. So it's encouraging that you have views in this, albeit you don't necessarily agree. But I think, and apologies if this has been said, because I had to nip out of the room a couple of times, but actually, the thing for me, when the criminal justice system become involved in hate crime, society has failed people. That should be the last resort. It should never get to that point. And communities need to step up. Individuals need to step. Every single person in this room has a personal responsibility. And sometimes when we come to these events, we kind of blame everybody else. If only they did this or they did that. But every single person here has a personal responsibility to influence, to be an active bystander, to challenge behaviour, to call it out when it needs to be. And I include myself in that when I say that. So thank you.
Is there anyone else would like to speak or would like to join in the discussion? No? Okay.
Yes, I think a massive round of applause is due for
Yeah.
the 6 speakers we've had again on this stage. And as you were saying there, we all also have a personal responsibility to uphold the kind of pillars of discourse, discussion, and debate in this room, so that we can talk about these issues. That's something that's very important. So I'd now like to invite Mandy to give her closing comments on our debate today before we go to our final vote on speaker ability.
Well, look, anyone who knows me will know that I can actually be highly critical. But in this particular instance today, I have just been blown away by today's event. And I have to say, quite humblingly so, that I always saw myself as belonging to a golden era of debate at Queen's University 30 years ago. But the standard of debate in this room today has blown me away. It has everything. It had humour. It had amazing storytelling. It had an ability to draw together so many different complex strands, because we are dealing with such a complex subject. To be able to draw all those strands together the way that our debaters have is just brilliant. I mean, personally, and I probably shouldn't admit this, but I will always, I suppose, be in the trenches. I'm a journalist who will always want to be in the front line, will always want to be with the community workers or the youth workers, the beating heart of the community. I will always passionately believe that one community worker can change the whole course of someone's life. I would also be a huge advocate for mental health. But I think what has come out in the debate today is that while the community is the beating heart, obviously, as some of the debaters so rightfully put, it can be very impulsive. There's a lot of emotions involved. So I mean, both sides have put forward such a high level of argument, and so I'm just going to say, can we just open it up now and vote on who you think was the best, because they were all brilliant in my eyes.
Thank you. So yes, that's right. Just to run over the vote on speaker ability again, this is not the side which you personally agree with the most. This is the side you thought spoke the best based on their presentation, rhetoric, argument, teamwork, and engagement. So can I have all those who would like to vote for the proposition on speaker ability raise their hands now?
Don't vote with your heart, vote with your head.
Yep. 1, 2. Okay, we have 11. And can I have all those who would like to vote for the opposition on speaker ability raise their hands now? Okay, that is 30 for the opposition. And finally, can I have all those who would like to abstain please raise their hands now? Okay, that is 4. So I'm pleased to announce that the results from the vote on speaker ability, that the opposition carry at 32-11. Congratulations. And finally, before I hand it back to Mandy for the rest of the agenda for this event, I just want to say and acknowledge all the hard work that's went into it. Misha and I came to Michael and the Victim Support NI team in May of 2024. And whenever we were kind of discussing our ideas of a debate, we never thought that it would take off as much as it had today. So I can speak on behalf of Misha and the whole team to say, like, I'm incredibly proud of how today has turned out. So thank you very much for all of your support. And I think it's something to be proud of as well, that the Literific and Victim Support NI can work together to give victims a voice, to let people share their experiences, that hate crime isn't a taboo topic, but it's something that we can discuss, and that together through this discussion, this discourse and this dialogue done in the right way, respectfully, that we can come to a solution on this prevalent issue. So finally, I'd just like to thank everyone involved, Misha, the Victim Support NI team, Michael, the Crescent Arts Centre team, and once again to our 2 guest chairs, Mandy McCauley and Professor Kevin Brown, and finally to the 6 young people that stand with me on this stage. So thank you very much for having us. And as a closing remark, the fun doesn't stop here. If you would like to join us in the McMorty Hall, we are having the third debate of today, which actually has a link to some of the themes that we discussed. It is This House Believes Masculinity is Inherently Toxic at 7 p.m. at the old McMorty Hall. You're more than welcome to see some of our fine speakers and an exhibition of chamber debating, and that goes as an extension and an invite for all society events that you're welcome at the Literific. So thank you very much, and I'll hand it back over to Mandy. Thank you.